Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of RepSpark Academy. Here with us today, we have the CEO of L SPACE Dac Clark to let you know on a special topic that affects every business, gross margin magic, and how to make real money. Without further ado, here's Dac.
Well, thank you, Susan. This is one of my favorite topics because if you don't have gross margin, you kind of don't have anything. I mean, you think of sales as the most important thing, but if your sales don't have the components of profit built into it, you're just going to have sales and you're probably not going to be able to cover your expenses and your overhead. The reason I know this is I've been around for a long time. I like to say I have a checkered past. So this is just some of the brands that I've been involved in an executive position. And so as I've gone through that, I've learned a lot. And one thing I've learned is how important gross margins can play in the success of the business. Today I'm at L SPACE, and I'm actually not the CEO. I'm one of the partners of L SPACE. And we have had a very successful run with L SPACE. We've been doing the brand since 2000 and have really had a lot of fun building this brand. And also it's challenged us because my business partner and I never were in the women's swim business. We were in shoe businesses, we were in surf businesses, a lot of things along the way. But we learned actually how to make success out of selling small little packages of product, which is our swimsuits. So today we're going to talk about going kind of behind the scenes and really understand pricing, costing, markdowns, discounts, and inventory, which are all the elements that you need to have and that you need to control to assure that you have gross margins, because the gross margins are the result of managing these elements really well. So today we're going to be talking about gross margins, but before we go into gross margin, I thought I'd start with, if anybody's running a business in the type of businesses that we're in wholesale, you're really worried about four main things. You're obviously worried about building your brand. You're also building great product, hopefully that people want to buy. You're also delivering gross margins, and you also have to make money at the end. So gross margins to me is one of the most important four things that management should have in their view on a daily basis, and the thing that they should spend time analyzing, measuring, and managing. So today we're going to talk about gross margin management, which is understanding your gross margin. It's managing your gross margins and understand how to manage markdowns, discounts, and most important, that wonderful asset or terrible liability that we have called inventory. So today, successful brands really tightly manage their gross margins. A lot of people that I've seen over the years, friends I've had, when they're not on top of their gross margins, sometimes they got out of business, literally, because they're not managing that essential thing, which is, how do I make money on my sales? So today we're going to talk about doing an audit. We're going to talk about understanding where you're making money and where you're losing money. We're going to talk about how to deliver results. And then we're going to talk a little bit about pricing, costing, markdowns, and inventory. And so you've got a price for profits. You got to understand your cost components. Markdowns have to be managed. I love this one because Susan put this in. When she talked about giving discounts, she said, be stingy. And she said, should I put that in there? I said, absolutely. I think that's great. And inventory, which is your biggest liability. So don't think about inventory as an asset. Start thinking about it as a liability. Okay, so let's talk about managing your gross margins. The first thing you need to do is complete a pricing audit. Now that sounds like a big thing you want a big accounting firm to come in and do. It's really not. It's really understanding what the elements are that make up your pricing and understand where you are in your pricing. So pricing starts with three factors: brand strength, brand innovation, premium pricing, and quality. A lot of people get afraid of pricing, and you get beat down by your retailers when you're in the wholesale business, and they try to beat you down. But if you've got really good brand that's actually resonating out there with a consumer, and you're depending on product innovation, you can get premium pricing. And obviously you've got to have quality in there all the time. So when we talk a little bit about pricing individually, let's talk about, how do you understand how to price? Well, first of all, it's kind of basic. You have to know the price ranges by the categories and the product ranges that you're competing in. So if you're selling a sweater and you're selling a sweater to a certain type of a retailer, what price should that sweater be so that it's competitive? And I'm not talking about the cheapest one, I'm talking about the middle to better. And of course, your product quality has to deserve that. But know what those are and price so that you're in the market for whoever you're selling for that typical commodity. And if you can't price your product properly, you're probably in the wrong category. Your brand shouldn't be in that category if you can't price it to make money. Build value into your products by putting in things that make your product unique, interesting, and desirable. Most important, desirable. Next thing is know your true costs. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but really understand how your costs are made up and what are the elements in your costing. Also, hold the line on pricing and margins. You don't give your stuff away. You're not in the business. If you give stuff away, there's only two people who are going to make money on your product, you or the person you're selling it to, which is your retailer. And if your retailer is getting all the margin because you're giving them all the discounts and you're not making you're not making your margins, then you probably need to ask yourself, why am I in this business? And the other thing is price elasticity. And again, that's understanding your pricing, not only within, say, the stores you sell, but where your pricing fits within the marketplace overall. So let's talk about managing gross margin. Let's talk about costing. Costing is one of those things that's not magical. It's not unknown. It's something you can absolutely know and absolutely put your finger on. And it's basically broken down into the number of elements that make up the costing of a product. First of all, it's fabric. And that fabric is not just the price of the fabric, but it's the yield of the fabric and the minimums. So if you price your product for X and you're estimating that your yield is going to be a certain yield, but except I've got to buy all these minimums, then maybe I have to buy too much fabric to make that style, and I don't want to make it. So you really got to understand price, yield, and minimums when you're looking at fabric. Trims, obviously it's cost, but it's also how much is it going to cost to sew that trim in. Now, again, I'm talking about if you're working with a domestic manufacturer where you're managing your cost sheet. Cutting, yield is the king, get the optimum amount of yield. And you've got to have cutters. There's good cutters and there's bad cutters out in the business. Sewing is also a big element of costing. You ought to know what the product complexity is and how hard it is to sew. And then shipping and landing costs and other costs. Now, if you're dealing overseas and you're making completed product packages, you also need to know those things because that's going to be the summary of how your products cost you overseas. But shipping and landing costs are also a bigger part of that. So really, it's understand how to manage those elements. And you manage those elements by putting together a cost sheet. And the cost sheet has these elements. And most important, not only do you put the cost sheet together and as your estimate, but then you close out every cut every time so that you know exactly what your costs really are and how well you did estimating that cost. A lot of people will get in it, they put together their cost estimate, they go out in the marketplace and they realize they're not making any money. Well, it's because the costing was actually much higher than they thought it was, and they should have known that right away because they should be closing the cuts. Closing the cuts is something simple. Somebody can do in accounting, so it's not that complicated. Next thing is markdowns, discounts, and inventory management. Markdowns are the biggest worry for retailers and also the biggest worries for manufacturers because you can overbuy. And overbuying is typically the worst thing that happens. Another thing that causes overshipping or markdowns is late shipping. You want to ship your stuff on time. You want to get the most amount of selling time on the sales floor. So you've got to organize your business so you ship on time, and if you can't, even ship early. The next thing is understand winners and losers, good styles, bad styles, and judge those good styles and bad styles. Because again, that's another place where your margins could just get away from you, is you just keep buying the wrong thing. And if you keep buying the wrong thing and designing the wrong thing, you're probably in the wrong business. I'm kidding, but you've got to be making stuff that people want. And then the other thing is falling in love with inventory. People think that they can sell it next season, and you really can't. You need to stay current. You need to keep your inventory current, and unless it's a basic style that you're going to carry on going, don't think you're going to make more money next season. You're going to probably need to get rid of it. Discounts is another area that erodes margins. Once you give it to them, it's impossible to take it back. I've been doing this for a long time. We're very stingy on our discounts. We don't give our products away because I can't undo that. It's like once I've rung the bell, I can't unring the bell. Trade discounts are another thing. Most of that is built in, like 810 EOM. It's a discount that the women's business gives to everybody. Usually there's 4% discounts. They're typical. And sometimes you're using trade discounts to sell product in season to generate demand. So you get your orders in by June 5th, you get a 5% discount. Markdown money is an evil thing. That's what retailers do. They come back and they said, well, our margins aren't high enough for your brand, and we need a margin builder. And sometimes you do that by giving them a product in the next season for less money, or sometimes you just have to write them a check. And the other thing is a lot of products are on wheels. I say don't do that. Sometimes you have to do that, but if you can avoid it, because these are things, these discount areas are things you can't get away from. The next thing is inventory management. Inventory has killed more brands than anything you can imagine, because it can be a huge liability, because you buy it for say $10, you're wholesaling it for $12, the retailers are selling it for $22, but you were buying it $5. Well, when you go to close it out, you might get $3. So you don't typically get your cost back when you close that product out. So I say do season budget by style. I say do unit plans, which you think about what you're going to sell. And then I think you need to rationalize that unit plan so that every style you have has how much you think you're going to sell by month, and how much you think that inventory that you need. And that's called unit planning, and retailers use a system called open to buy. You can look those up on the internet. I would advise you guys to use similar systems to manage your inventory. Again, ship on time and ship early. Ship complete whenever you can, because that'll endear you to the retailer. But most importantly, it gives you the most amount of selling time on the sales floor. When I was in the retail business, I could never understand why somebody would ship me mid-season for back to school. They just lost the first half of the back to school selling time when customers were going to be in my store. And now I had to sell all their styles that only for half the time, because customers don't come back. They come once and they buy, and then they come back the next season. So anyway, think about that, and think about what adds or takes away from final gross margins, and be sure that you're really on that margin and that you're really managing that inventory. So now we're going to move on to some questions that some of you may have, and I think Susan's got some questions that people have sent in.
Yes, I do. I have some. One of the questions I got is, how often should you audit your gross margins? Is it a yearly thing, a quarterly thing? What are some best practices to audit my gross margins?
Well, best practices to audit inventory is to know your inventory. And to know your inventory means every single time you go and do a cut, you are actually closing out that cut. So you thought it was going to cost you this much, and it actually costs you this much. So you begin to know what your inventory is. So it's really more about not knowing it than doing a quote unquote audit. Mm-hmm. And the only way you know that, even if you're doing import product, you've got to know what your true cost is, not what you thought it was going to be. So close out every cost sheet and make sure that that cost sheet was built with all the elements, and then when the costs come in, that you filled out, completed, and closed out that cut.
You mentioned also about the fact that there is a double margin that retailers are looking at, or that I need to account for when I'm selling to wholesale to not give discounts.
Okay, so yeah, this would be for somebody that's coming from having an e-commerce business, or say their own retail stores, and they're selling their product for a certain price. When you're going to go wholesale, you need to be selling that product for half or little, like maybe more than half as a wholesale cost to your retailer, because the retailer has to mark that up to be competitive with you in the e-commerce business or competitive with other people. So a lot of people make a mistake and they price their products because I want to get a little better price to my consumer, and it makes it very difficult to get into the wholesale business, because there isn't enough room in your price, in your wholesale or your retail price, to have a wholesale price and then a retailer markup, and then your competitive retail price.
Okay,
you got to really understand that.
Got it. And I see another question here regarding that I should never be embarrassed by my pricing, but how do I take that control in my retailer relationship? So if they're asking for these discounts, like what are some techniques that I could use to reframe, I don't know, that relationship?
Well, first of all, if you're a brand and you're going to be going into wholesale, you probably have some market awareness and things like that. And the idea is, I think, to come into a retailer and just don't try to open up everybody. try to open up select retailers. And instead of you trying to sell them, you're giving them the opportunity to now buy your product. And so, that way you're sort of important to like a Nordson's. We're not looking to sell or anything. We want to start our brand with you. We think we can build a long-term relationship. You understand our brand. You've got to have a strong brand, obviously, before you skip into wholesale. That's kind of the way to do it. And then just don't give away discounts. You've got to know when to walk away. Sometimes retailers can be very piggish. And so you've got to know when to say, no, not right now. I mean, when we were building L SPACE in the early days, we had a lot of stores that said, who are you? Why do we need you? All those kinds of things. And we just, okay, we'll put you in, but we need this margin. And we'd say, well, no, we're not ready for you then. And you walk away. But long-term, it pays back, because once you've established a price discount with retailers, you can't undo it.
Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions coming in, but I definitely think this was very helpful just for everyone to understand how to audit their costs and understand their true cost of things. What's it called? I just want to let you guys know that RepSpark Academy is definitely something for everyone to learn on how to grow their brand, and that you can check out repspark.com/webinars to see when the next webinar is. If you're interested in learning more about the B2B wholesale commerce platform and how our platform works within the space, please reach out to us, or you can always check us out on repspark.com. Thank you, Dac, so much.
Thank you, Susan. Best of luck all of you in the holiday season coming up.